Welcome back to Billionaire Success Lessons. Today, we are telling the story of a man who did not build his empire by inventing the internet, launching a social media platform, or dominating the world through software. He built it through taste, patience, nerve, discipline, and one of the sharpest strategic minds in modern business history. He entered a world many people misunderstand, a world that looks soft on the surface, but is in fact brutally competitive underneath. A world of fashion, wine, jewelry, design, prestige, and desire. This is the story of Bernard Arnault. And what makes his journey so powerful is not only that he became one of the richest men in the world. It is that he built his fortune in a field where image matters, but where image alone is never enough. Luxury may look glamorous from the outside, but behind every iconic brand is a hard machine of discipline, positioning, operations, pricing, timing, and relentless discipline. Bernard Arnault did not simply sell beautiful things. He built a system that turned beauty, heritage, and aspiration into one of the most powerful business empires on earth. That is why his story matters. Because a lot of people see luxury and think softness. But the truth is, building luxury at the highest level requires hardness. It requires precision. It requires restraint. It requires timing. It requires the ability to protect value when everyone else is chasing volume. And above all, it requires the courage to think in decades while the rest, where the world thinks in quarters. Bernard Arnault was born in Roubaix, France, in 1949, into an industrial family. LVMH says he later studied at École Polytechnique, one of France's most prestigious schools, before joining the family company. That matters, because his story did not begin in fashion. It began in engineering, discipline, and business structure. And that is where the first lesson begins. Great success does not always begin in the industry where you eventually become famous. Sometimes it begins in the mindset you build before the world knows your name. A disciplined mind, a strategic eye, a willingness to look at businesses not only as they are, but as they could become. That way of thinking would define Bernard Arnault's life. A lot of people imagine billionaires as people who get lucky once and ride the wave forever. But that is not how durable empires are built. Durable empires are built by people who learn how to identify hidden value before the crowd fully understands it. And Bernard Arnault seems to have mastered that art better than almost anyone. Before he became the face of global luxury, he worked in his family's construction business. But he did not stay trapped by the first version of his life. He did what many great builders eventually do. He recognized that the future of his ambition was not necessarily tied to the past he inherited. That is a hard move for many people. Because leaving the familiar means leaving safety. It means stepping away from what already works in order to build what might work even better. It means risking the comfort of certainty for the possibility of something much larger. That takes courage. And courage in business is often quieter than people think. It is not always a dramatic speech. Sometimes it is just the decision to move early, move intelligently, and move before the world agrees with you. That pattern becomes very clear in 1984, public accounts and later summaries of his rise high, his major breakthrough to the acquisition of Boost, the struggling textile group that included Christian Dior. Arnault has long been associated with the deal that gave him control of Dior, which became the real jewel inside the distressed business. That moment is one of the most important turning points in his entire life, because it shows a principle that almost every serious builder needs to understand. Inside a weak structure, there is sometimes one extraordinary asset. The key is having the vision to see it before everyone else does. Most people saw a troubled company. Arnault saw Dior. Most people saw risk. He saw leverage. Most people would have focused on what was broken. He focused on what could be protected, strengthened, and turned into a foundation for something far bigger. That is not luck. That is judgment. And judgment is one of the most valuable forms of power in the world. A person with money but no judgment can destroy everything. A person with judgment can create extraordinary value out of complicated, broken, or neglected situation. That is what Bernard Arnault did. He did not just buy an asset. He saw a future hidden inside it. And that is a lesson worth remembering. The world often misprices what it does not fully understand. That is where strategic people find opportunity. Over time, Dior became a cornerstone of his rise. But Arnault's ambition was never going to stop there. He was not just trying to own a great brand. He was trying to understand how great brands could live together, losing their individual identity. That is a much harder challenge than it sounds. Because luxury is fragile. If you push too hard, you cheapen it. If you scale too carelessly, you weaken it. If you chase mass approval too aggressively, you destroy exclusivity. And if you fail to preserve a brand's soul, the numbers may look good for a while, but the long-term power fades. That is where many people fail. They know how to buy a brand. They do not know how to protect what made the brand special in the first place. Bernard Arnault built his career on understanding that difference. LVMH says he became the majority. 1989 and has led it ever since. LVMH also says the group was created in 1987 by merging Moët Hennessy and Louis Vuitton. And under Arnault's leadership, it grew into the world's leading luxury goods company. Now pause there for a moment. This is where the scale of the story changes. He was no longer simply a businessman with a sharp eye for one acquisition. He was becoming an empire builder. And empire building is different. A successful operator can improve on company. An empire builder must understand systems. He must understand capital allocation, brand architecture, talent, succession, geography, pricing, acquisitions, timing, power. That is a different level of thinking. And this is where another major lesson appears. A builder's life changes when he stops asking, how do I win with one business? And starts asking, how do I create a structure that keeps winning? That is what Arnault appears to have done. He built LVMH not as a random collection of labels, but as a carefully shaped house of houses. Each maison needed to remain itself. Each one needed identity, heritage, story, craft, desire, strategic leadership, and the strength of a larger system. That balance is very difficult. Too much centralization and you kill the soul. Too little and you lose discipline. Too much growth and you dilute prestige. Too much caution and you miss the future. Great leadership lives in the tension between those extremes. And Bernard Arnault seems to have spent decades mastering that tension. This is why his story is not merely about fashion. It is about control. Control of image. Control of distribution. Control of pricing. Control of acquisitions. Control of the narrative around value. Because luxury, at the highest level, is not just about products. It is about managing desire. And desire is one of the most complicated forces in the world. You cannot force it to crudely. You cannot beg for it. You cannot flood the market and expect. You have to shape it carefully. That is where Arnault's discipline becomes so important. A lot of people think luxury is built through extravagance. But true luxury is often built through restraint, knowing what not to do, knowing what not to discount, knowing what not to overexpose, knowing what not to chase. That kind of restraint is hard in business, because growth always tempts people to overeat. But the strongest leaders know that preserving the meaning of a brand is often more valuable than maximizing short-term volume. That is a lesson far beyond luxury. It applies to life itself. If you cheapen what matters most, If you protect what matters, compounding becomes possible. And compounding is one of the deepest patterns in Bernard Arnault's story. Brand equity compounds, distribution power compounds, trust compounds, taste compounds, reputation compounds, capital compounds, patience compounds. At first, compounding looks slow. Then one day it looks unstoppable. That is how empires are really built. Not through one loud moment, but through years of disciplined accumulation. Arnault's expansion of LVMH over decades became legendary because he kept adding iconic brands and strengthening the group's reach across fashion, leather goods, jewelry, wines and spirits, cosmetics, watches, hospitality, and selective LVMH retailing. Now says the group includes 75 prestigious brands, operates more than 6,280 stores, and generated 80.8 billion euros in 2025 revenue. Those are not just big numbers. They are the visible result of long-term strategic patience. Think about what that really means. A man who once worked in a family construction business became the architect of the world's most powerful luxury group. Not by building one product, not by relying on one trend, but by assembling and protecting a system. That is extraordinary. And it offers another important lesson, built not by inventing demand, but by organizing timeless demand better than anyone else. People have always wanted beauty, status, craft, exclusivity, celebration, objects that signal meaning. Arnault did not create those desires. He mastered the system that serves them at the highest level. And that distinction matters, because it means his success is not based on a passing fad. It is based on deep human behavior. That kind of foundation is very strong. But strong foundations do not mean easy leadership. The larger the empire grows, the heavier the responsibility becomes. Now it is no longer about one acquisition. It is about culture across a giant organization. Creative leadership, brand transitions, global cycles, currency shifts, consumer downturns, geopolitical shocks, management succession, and the constant danger that success. That is where long-term leaders are really tested. Not when growth is easy, but when scale itself becomes pressure. Recent LVMH reporting shows that even a giant like this is not immune to volatility. LVMH said 2025 revenue was 80.8, and Reuters reported in April 2026 that first quarter sales were affected. Luxury environment in some regions. That matters because it reminds us of something important. No empire is beyond pressure. The question is not whether pressure comes. The question is how leadership responds when it does. Story becomes even more interesting. Because by now he is not simply managing brands. He is managing continuity. How do you keep a giant group sharp? How do you keep heritage alive without becoming old? How do you remain global without becoming generic? How do you protect exclusivity in a world that wants constant expansion? Those are difficult questions, and there are no easy answers. But difficult questions are where serious people reveal themselves. For anyone watching on Billionaire Success Lessons, this is one of the most valuable parts of Arnault's story. Because beneath the headlines about wealth, there is a deeper truth. His life is about the disciplined management of complexity. That is what most people underestimate. They see glamour. He sees structure. They see fashion shows. He sees distribution power. They see famous names. He sees long-term asset quality. They see the surface. He sees the system underneath the surface. And that ability to see the system is what separates remarkable builders from ordinary operators. There is also something else deeply human in his story. Bernard Arnault did not build his empire in a field where the product is merely useful. He built in a field where the product must make people feel something. And that is harder than it looks. Luxury is emotional, aspirational, symbolic, cultural. You are not just selling a bag, a watch, a bottle, a jacket, or a ring. You are selling memory, taste, identity, signal, fantasy, belonging. That takes sensitivity as well as strength. So one of the quiet lessons in his story is this: power does not always belong to the loudest person. Sometimes it belongs to the person who understands desire most clearly. That is true in luxury. And it is true in life. If you understand what people truly value, and you know how to protect that value without cheapening it, you are operating on a very high level. That is what Arnault appears to have done for decades. And that is why his story feels so durable. It is not the story of a man who got rich quickly and then faded. It is the story of a man who built one of the defining institutions of modern luxury and kept shaping it year after year through discipline, acquisitions, leadership, and that kind of endurance deserves respect, because endurance is the hidden engine of almost every extraordinary life. A lot of people can start strongly. Far fewer can stay excellent over time. Far fewer can remain dangerous after they are already successful. Far fewer can keep thinking clearly after wealth, fame, and power have already arrived. But those who can do that become different. They stop being successful people. They become institution. And Bernard Arnault is one of those figures. So when you think about Bernard Arnault, do not think only about rankings, wealth charts, or the glamour of luxury. Think about the young engineer from Ruby. Think about the disciplined mind, shaped before the spotlight. Think about the acquisition of Dior, hidden inside a troubled company. Think about the majority takeover of LVMH in 1989. Think about the decades spent assembling, protecting, and expanding a house of world-famous brands. Think about the leader who kept building until LVMH became the global benchmark in luxury. That is the story of Bernard Arnault. Not just a story of billions. A story of judgment. A story of patience. A story of discipline. A story of desire. And a story of proving that some of the most powerful people in the world are the ones who can turn taste, timing, and long-term thinking into an empire the entire world recognizes.